Hey everyone, this is Victoria Tillery, and this is my final presentation for higher education governance. Today we're going to be exploring higher education governance and some of the historical components of higher education. Let's begin by talking about what is governance. We'll start with a general definition that comes from Wikipedia. Governance in higher education is the means by which institutions in higher education are formally organized and managed. Even though this seems simple enough, governance in higher education is actually extremely complex and differs from state to state. According to John Levin in the Handbook of Student Affairs Administration, governance in college and universities is the area of the institution that involves the executive offices, the board of trustees, and faculty senates. John Levin also describes governance as a political activity with an objective of this political activity to mediate the interests within an institution or university system, especially as it relates to resources. The political activity of governance is directly related to what James March and Joanne Olson call the exchange perspective. The exchange perspective describes governance as exchanges and actions between individuals due to self-interest and self-advancement, meaning that people who get involved in governance for self-gain according to the exchange perspective. Also, according to Jeremy Stringer in the Handbook of Student Affairs Administration, politics are deeply ingrained in higher education. He states that new academic professionals dislike that politics are so ingrained in higher education. In fact, Stringer acknowledges that knowledge of politics is one of the three management skills more critical for success in the academic field. Next, let's talk about governance in American higher education. According to Philip G. Altbach in American Higher Education in the 21st Century, there is no general agreement that decides the appropriate level of government involvement in higher education. And because accountability and transparency from institutions is becoming more critical, traditional governance is dwindling. According to Altbach, traditional governance is important and valuable because traditional governance allows faculty control over academic decisions. The new worldwide trend is managerialism approach to governance. This managerialism approach is an extremely complex approach to governance in higher education. This managerialism approach includes explicit standards and performance measurements. According to Patrick Fitzsimmons, managerialism will enhance efficiency and quality. Fitzsimmons also explains that governance is the culture and structure of the relationship between constituents. With the new managerialism approach, governance will not depend on legal rational authority, but rationality that will enhance efficiency. Next, let's move on to talk about the differences in the state structures in American higher education. According to Ames McGinnis in American Higher Education in the 21st Century, the state-level higher education organization in the U.S. today took place in the early 1970s. State higher education agencies began establishing governing boards. The general pattern in the U.S. is that each state has a unique relationship between governments and higher education. These relationships are extremely complex. McGinnis states the importance of understanding the difference between governance and coordination. He says that understanding the differences is fundamental for understanding state higher education structures. Some structures are created to govern institutions, while others are established to coordinate state post-secondary education or community colleges. All states assign responsibility for governing public colleges to one or more boards. According to McGinnis, the most common name for these boards are Board of Trustees or the Board of Regents. In Georgia, through the University System of Georgia, our governing board is the Board of Regents. According to McGinnis, governance has a distinctive meaning when talking about governing boards of an institution. In the U.S., post-secondary education has a strong history of institutional autonomy, meaning that the institution has a lot of freedom to operate in the way the institution finds appropriate. A basic responsibility of a governing board would be to monitor the balance of institutional autonomy and prominent public accountability. According to Levin, institutional governance is what shapes institutional behaviors and is also defined as the character of the institution. Levin also states that governance is both how institutions behave and actions are carried out, or the methods, and what actions are taken, the goals are realized. Levin defines two views of governance, the traditional perspective and the institutional type. The traditional players describe governance as a formal structure held together by different players, you could say. These players could include a board of trustees or board of regents, presidents, administrators, and faculty. This perspective implies that the institution has a well-organized, not complex, hierarchical system. However, this perspective excludes external players and also the students. This perspective also suggests the institutions aspire to be autonomous, separate from external players such as the government and the public. The traditional perspective comes with challenges. One challenge is the fact that the state-allocated funds are on a downward trend for public institutions, and external factors are demanding more transparency and accountability from the institutions. Thus, the aspiration to become autonomous is a difficult aspiration to achieve. External factors have been playing a major role in the institution for a while now. Outsourcing has become an economic survival tool for the institutions, which shifts the institution away from traditional aspects. Adjunct and part-time professors are now normal to see around campus, and outsourcing of auxiliary services, such as dining and housing, has become essential. Adding these external factors as partners with the institution shifts the institution from functioning in a traditional perspective. Next is the institutional type as a perspective. Institutional type may be one of the most influential variables in how colleges and universities operate. According to the Carnegie Foundation in 2005, there were 4,387 institutions in the United States. Of those, 199 were research institutions. The majority were public community colleges. Governance structures will differ according to what type of institution you are examining. For example, a research institution will have very different characteristics than a community college. At a research institution, most students are traditional 18 to 21-year-old, whereas at a community college, most students are non-traditional and the average age is 27. As far as a governance is concerned, there are different aspects as well. For example, in a traditional governance situation, faculty are hired and centered around faculty rights, academic freedom, tenure, and professional autonomy, whereas that would not be the case for a community college. Governance involving faculty at a community college would be more of an advisory role. Next, I would like to talk about governance and student affairs. I feel strongly that students should be the primary focus of an institution. Most institutional mission statements speak about how their institution is going to serve the students and what types of services their institution can provide to potential students. Without the students, there would not be an institution. John Levin states that institutional governance and student affairs should not be a mystery of each other, but the connection between the two is not always apparent. Neoliberalism refers to the idea that colleges and universities are looking to the private sector for things such as funding. Because neoliberalism is typically identified more towards self-advancement and less toward the public good, neoliberalism isn't the traditional context of student affairs. Institutions are becoming more involved in commercial activities such as athletic competition in order to create revenue for the institution. Some have thought the neoliberalism approach does not have the students' interest in the forefront. Levin suggests that in the free market environment that many campuses across America are today, student development is neglected. Levin suggests that the low profile of institutional governance may be the cause of this, which then poses the question, how do you find the balance between a post-industrial, economically globalized environment and what puts students' interests at the center of the institution? Levin suggests a reformation of governments. The reformation would mean replacing economic exchange with community building and connect governance to students' education and development. This will involve many different constituents at the institution. Higher education is an extremely complex idea. Almost every state can provide a different example or a different definition of what higher education is in their state, which can cause this topic to be pretty confusing. I feel that we can expect and should anticipate changes towards higher education governance in the future. Thank you.